Ancient astronomers left a record precise enough to reconstruct the night sky 2,000 years ago. What they cannot tell us is what one particular light in that sky actually was. Welcome to the science of the unexplained. I want to take you on a journey through the oldest astronomical mystery in the Christian tradition, where hard data and sacred text have circled each other for 4 centuries without resolution. In 1604, Johannes Kepler watched Jupiter and Saturn draw close in the constellation Ophiuchus. A nova flared nearby, and Kepler, one of the most rigorous mathematical minds in history, stopped his calculations and wrote that this triple conjunction of planets, followed by a new star, was almost certainly what the Magi had followed to Bethlehem. He wasn't writing theology, he was writing astronomy. The calculation forced the question he could not shake. If the sky event was real enough to reconstruct with mathematics, why can't we agree 400 years later on what it actually was? The only primary source for the star is Matthew 2:1-12. No other gospel mentions it. Luke's nativity has shepherds and angels. No star, no magi. Mark and John begin with no birth narrative at all. Matthew alone places wise men from the east in Jerusalem, asking Herod where the newborn king of the Jews has been born, guided by his star, a Greek word, astes, that meant a single point of light. That silence from the other Gospels is the first problem. The second is Herod. Historian Josephus, writing in Antiquities of the Jews around 93 AD, places Herod's death after a lunar eclipse and before Passover, which most scholars date to 4 BC. If the Nativity occurred during Herod's reign, Jesus was born no later than 4 BC. Our calendar was recalculated in the 6th century by a monk named Dionysius Exiguus, who appears to have been off by at least 4 years. So the event, if it was an event, happened in a window between roughly 7 BC and 1 BC. That window is exactly wide enough to contain several distinct astronomical phenomena. And that is precisely where 4 centuries of competing theories begin. The Magi are not kings in Matthew's account. They are magoi, a word rooted in the Persian priestly class, specifically associated with Zoroastrian astronomical and divinatory practice. They were, in modern terms, court astrologers, men trained to read political significance into celestial movement. Babylonian astronomical diaries, cuneiform tablets held today in the British Museum, document sky observations going back to the 7th century BC with a precision that still impresses modern astronomers. These were not mystical records, they were data logs, planetary positions, eclipses, conjunctions recorded nightly. If the Magi came from the East, they came from a tradition that had been mapping the heavens with professional rigor for centuries before Matthew wrote a single word. What those tablets show for the period between 7 and 5 BC is remarkable. In 7 BC, Jupiter and Saturn formed a triple conjunction in Pisces, meaning they appeared to meet, separate and meet again 3 times across several months. The German astronomer Johannes Kepler calculated this conjunction in 1614 and proposed it as the star's origin. His reasoning was astrological as much as astronomical. In ancient interpretation, Jupiter represented kingship, Saturn represented the Jewish people, and Pisces was associated with the end of days. To a Babylonian court astrologer, that combination would have carried unmistakable political weight. But the 7 BC conjunction has a problem. The planets never actually merged into a single bright point. At their closest, they were still separated by nearly 1 degree, twice the width of the full moon, visible as 2 distinct objects to the naked eye. The star that Matthew describes that went before them and stood over a specific house in Bethlehem sounds like something far more singular, far more directional. And that description, a star that moves and then stops, is what separates this account from every natural explanation astronomers have proposed, because stars and planets do not do that. Not in any literal sense. which forces the question, was Matthew describing what the Magi saw or what the Magi believed they were following? Modern astronomers have run the calculations forward and backward with software no Kepler could have imagined. The results have narrowed the candidates to roughly 4 categories and eliminated none of them entirely. The first is planetary conjunction. Kepler's 7 BC triple conjunction in Pisces remains the most historically popular candidate. Astronomer David Hughes of the University of Sheffield, in his 1979 book The Star of Bethlehem, An Astronomer's Confirmation, argued this conjunction fits the Matthean timeline better than any alternative. Hughes dated the Magi's journey using the conjunction's first appearance in the East, placing the birth of Jesus at 7 BC, which aligns with the Herodian problem, but the visual objection stands: 2 planets do not become 1 star. The second candidate is a comet. Halley's comet passed in 12 BC, too early for most nativity chronologies, and comets in ancient Near Eastern tradition were almost universally read as omens of disaster, not royal birth. Chinese astronomical records, which are among the most comprehensive of the ancient world, document a separate comet in 5 BC that lingered for over 70 days. Historian Colin Humphreys of Cambridge University proposed in a 1991 paper in the Quarterly Journal of the Royal Astronomical Society that this comet fits the directional language in Matthew. Comets, unlike planets, appear to hang over a location as Earth's movement shifts perspective. The third is a nova or supernova. Chinese and Korean records document a new star appearing in 5 BC in the constellation Aquila. It was visible for weeks. No Western records corroborate it, but that absence is not evidence of absence. Western astronomical record-keeping in that period was fragmentary. The fourth candidate is the one that reframed the debate most sharply. In 1999, astronomer Michael Molnar of Rutgers University published The Star of Bethlehem, The Legacy of the Magi. Molnar examined a Roman coin minted in Antioch around 6 BC, depicting the sign of Aries with Jupiter, a combination he connected to astrological texts that specifically identified Judea as governed by Aries. On April 17, 6 BC, Jupiter underwent a lunar occultation in Aries. It was eclipsed by the moon and then reappeared, an event ancient astrologers called a regal omen. This event was invisible to the naked eye in daylight. Only an astronomer specifically watching for it would have known it occurred. Molnar argues the star was never a spectacle for the general public. It was a datum in a professional calculation. That argument doesn't resolve the question, it deepens it. Because if Molnar is right, the Magi were not following a light in the sky, they were following a conclusion they had already reached at their desks. What Matthew describes as a star may be in part a theological translation of an astrological event that had no visual drama at all. We began with Kepler running a calculation and arriving at a question he couldn't dismiss. We end somewhere more complicated than he found. The astronomy is real. The window of time is established. The Babylonian tradition that would have produced exactly these kinds of observers is documented in clay. What remains genuinely unresolved is the translation problem, not between languages, but between categories of knowing. When Matthew's Magi say they saw his star in the east, were they reporting an observation, an interpretation, or a revelation that arrived through calculation rather than spectacle? Historian of religion E.P. Sanders, in The Historical Figure of Jesus, 1993, noted that Matthew's infancy narrative carries strong theological architecture, each element echoing Hebrew scripture deliberately. That doesn't make the star invented. It means the account was written to carry more than one kind of truth simultaneously. The question that remains, if Molnar's occultation hypothesis is correct, and the event required professional astronomical knowledge to detect, who told Matthew, writing decades later, to describe it as a star at all? And if the next mystery we investigate is any indication, the gap between what was seen and what was written down is often where the strangest evidence lives.